This is a story that I only know of through several tellings by a particular storyteller from Madison, David Kesey Berg, that I heard over 20 years ago. And it's a story that stayed with me. There was once a dispute over a piece of land. Two men each said and claimed that they had ownership of the land. Now, one of the men was cutting down the trees and damming the rivers and stripping the land for minerals. And the other man objected. Oh, he lived on the land. And the actions of the other man, well, they were chasing away the animals and polluting the rivers and destroying the fields and the plants. They argued and disputed over this and could not resolve it. And so they took it to a traveling circuit court judge. A temporary courtroom was set up under the towering oak tree and its spreading branches right at the edge of the disputed land. And as the two men and their families and all the people around, their neighbors and friends, came to gather under that oak tree, that makeshift courtroom, they saw that there was another creature already there, a sow with her suckling piglets. And they knew at once this was a sign. The judge today would be no mere mortal, for everyone knew that the sow was the goddess Freya's animal. And so no one was surprised when they saw coming down the road an old woman, her white hair shining like a helmet in the sun, as she rode in on her horse. And they knew it was Freya in mortal disguise. The old woman listened to the claims and the arguments, the dispute on both sides of both the men, claiming that they each had the right to live on or to do with the land as they so chose. And after hearing both of them and their arguments, she sent them home to come back tomorrow with proof that each one was the owner of the land. So the next day they returned. And the judge called first on the man who had been cutting down the trees and damming the rivers and mining for minerals. And he stood up proud, chest puffed out, his hand holding a stack of paper, documents filled with crabbed writing front and back, every one of them proving ownership, money transacted, passed down from one generation to the next, from his father's father on down. Proof that he owned the land. He took that paper and showed it around to everyone. And then sat down. And it was the other man's turn. He stood up with his head bowed and his hands in his pockets. He had no papers, no documents. But as he lifted his head up and looked out across the land, he began to speak. And he said he and his family and people had lived on this land for as long as they could all collectively remember. Back to his father and his father's father and his father's father's father and his father's 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 father on back. And he spoke of how the land had changed through those generations and those years, and how it had stayed the same. He talked about the land itself, its shape and contours, and where the animals lived and moved across it, where the best berry bushes were. Every detail about how the land had moved and changed as the animals came through the seasons regularly and then changing, and most recently, leaving or being harmed. He described in detail how the land had sustained the man and his family on back through the generations, and how they had cared for it. And when he had finished speaking, there was silence under that oak tree, the makeshift court with the sow and her suckling pigs, until the old woman, the judge, stood up, and old age fell off of her like a mantle. And there, the goddess Freya stood in all her radiance, as bright as the sun. And she looked at the man who had just finished speaking. And she said, "By your words, you have proven that you know this land as well as you know yourself. You are the true owner of this land. For you are as much a part of the land as it is a part of you. The land owns you as much as you own the land." And the goddess Freya's word was given.